Good morning and happy Thanksgiving. Well, tomorrow is Thanksgiving for me, but this video probably won't be put out until Thanksgiving. So, last video you saw, I roasted some squash and made some pulp with it, puree with it, so that I could do some Thanksgiving cooking. And the first thing I'm going to be using it for are pumpkin cloverleaf rolls. Now, I grew up with my mom making cloverleaf rolls, which, I don't know if you can see that picture there. It's where you take 3 balls, put them together in 1 cup, and then they rise together and they make a little pull apart roll. So I found this version. I didn't grow up with the pumpkin cloverleaf rolls, but I found this version online at familyfun.go.com. I don't know if the recipe's still there, but I was looking at the date this was printed and it was 2010, so I've been making these rolls for 10 years. So anyway, I'm gonna follow this recipe. I'm actually gonna double it because we really like these rolls, and if we have leftovers, they'll get eaten. So there are 6 of us in this family. Alright, so first we start with 3 3/4 cups of flour, which doubled. That's going to be 7 1/4 cups. So let's get to measuring that. All right, 2. Over. 6. And I'll do the 3/4 twice. Alright, so that's flour. Let me put the lid on this before I knock it over and get flour all over the floor. Wouldn't that be fun? Alright, get that out of the way. Alright, next is the yeast. And it calls for 2 1/4 cups. Sorry. 2 1/4 teaspoons. I didn't get my measuring spoons out. So 2 1/4 teaspoons per recipe, so I'm going to double that. So that'll be 4 1/2 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, 4 1/2. Just barely. Looks like I need to get some more yeast out of the freezer. Okay. Put it this way. And then we're going to add, the recipe calls for 1 teaspoon. Since I'm doubling, it'll be 2 teaspoons. And I'm using just some Himalayan sea salt. So 1, 2. Okay, we'll just stir this together. Set it aside, and now we'll do the liquids. Alright, so the recipe calls for 1/4 cup of milk. I've got 1/2 cup for my doubled recipe, and they want it heated so that it's nice and warm to get the yeast activated. And then the recipe also calls for honey for sweetener. Sorry, I gotta get a spatula. Less prepared than I thought. Okay, so 1/4 cup of honey, so 1/2 cup for my recipe. We're going to add that with the milk in this bowl. I'm gonna go ahead and put the milk in this measuring cup and get some more of that honey out. Honey is always so hard to get out of the measuring stuff. Honey and oil, they're very annoying to work with. But a little bit of heat, it'll make it nice and runny, easier to get out. All right. We're also going to add in some water. The recipe calls for half a cup of warm water, so that'll be a full cup for me. So that's warm enough. And then we also need 1 egg for the recipe. I'll use 2 eggs. How do you like my egg holder from the Pioneer Woman? I love it. They've got little flowers on the bottom. I've got a couple of these and I probably need another one. Just leave them on the counter since they're farm fresh eggs. They have a coating on them that protects them so you don't have to refrigerate them unless you wash them. So I got these for sitting on my counter. Okay, 1 cup of water. I like to open the eggs into another container just in case one of them goes bad, just to protect it, the rest of the dish from getting spoiled. Okay, they're both good. And look at those yolks, so pretty. Okay. And then we also need a half a cup of puree, which is a full cup for my recipe. So here's that gorgeous puree that I made the other day. And a bit more, took out too much. Okay, so there's the cup of puree, pumpkin squash puree. I really like to scrape my measuring dishes clean. Try to get out as much as possible. All right. We'll whisk all this together. All right. Now we're going to add this liquid ingredients to the dry ingredients. So with the fork, we're gonna just blend it all together until it's all combined. This size of fork is usually better when you're not doubling the recipe. Seems a little small for this job. But it's working. Alright, I'm going to start mixing it by hand now. It's getting a little tough with the fork. And then I'm going to also add in some sage leaves. Now the recipe calls for 6 fresh sage leaves to be needed. What do they say? Needing the 6 sage leaves into the dough. And they want it to be slivered, but I have dried leaves and I prefer them to be more ground up and not slivered, just so the flavor is more spread throughout the rolls. So I just take my dried leaves, which when I pick the sage, I end up just drying them like this, and when I have time, then I'll, grind them up or make ground sage from it. But I haven't had the time for that yet, so I just picked off some of the leaves that I'll need, and then I'll just grind them up in my hand like this. And it'll get kneaded into the dough and spread around. So here we go. Bring it down just a little. Almost there. We still have just a little bit more dough. Little sage stick. Stem from the leaves. One thing I like about this pumpkin recipe is that it's a pumpkin recipe where you don't add in all the typical pumpkin spices, like cinnamon, clove, allspice, those kinds of flavors. So you get the pumpkin with a different flavor, which is the sage. So that's kind of nice. Alright, it's starting to take shape here. Go around and clean up all the flour. Alright, once I have this all combined, I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap, and then we'll put it in the fridge for about an hour before we continue working with it. And we are pretty much at that stage right now. So I'll get this put into a cool spot and come back in a little while, and we'll show you what to do with the rest of it. It is time to finish working on the pumpkin rolls. You can see here out where I had it sitting in a cool spot. There's no room in my fridge, so I took it out to a enclosed room where my freezers are, and it sat out there in the cold, and it has doubled in size at least. So we're going to roll these now into the cloverleaf balls. So what we need to do is we're going to punch it down and flip it out onto the board here, and then we're going to take some margarine and melt it, and then once we cut these apart and make them into little balls, then we'll dip them into the margarine and put them in the cupcake holders. So I'm going to go ahead and melt this. And then flip this out. Now technically the directions say that you need the sage leaves into the dough now. I did it earlier, so not a big deal. Works either way. All right, good enough. So we're just gonna knead this a little bit. It is a little sticky, but we have the flour there, so that'll take the stickiness out, so it's easier to work with. Now, this for me is always kind of the tricky part, because math is my favorite subject, but it always gets tricky to me because you have to divide the dough into half. So cut it in half, and then you cut each half into 6 pieces. This is so you get evenly sized bread dough balls to make your rolls out of. Mine don't always end up the same size. So then you take each half and you make divide each half into 6 portions. So I'm going to cut it in half and then cut each half into thirds, and that'll give me my 6 pieces. Okay, so cut each log into thirds. So 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And then each of these portions you divide into 3. So you can see why it's just a little confusing. Some of my squash bits in here didn't get fully mashed. Oh well. Alright, so we'll take each piece now and cut it into thirds. 1, 2, 3. I like to make a little kind of log out of it so that you mostly get even sizes when you cut it. The middle piece always seems to end up a little bit larger than the others. But it's easier to divide it into thirds. Okay. So I'll just work through this one half of the dough with you, and then I'll do the other half separately. Okay. Because see, those thirds don't end up being all the same size, and then the balls end up being different sizes, and then you end up with a clover leaf that's, you know, got an oddball large piece or small piece in it. But that's what makes it homemade, right? Okay, now let's see if the butter's ready. Yeah, good enough. The rest will melt. Okay, so this is the fun part. You need your muffin pan. I'm trying to think. I don't think you need to have it greased because you're dipping the balls into butter as you put them in. So I don't grease it. You can if you want, I guess, but it's not necessary. So then you take each ball and you roll it up, or each piece of dough, and roll it into a ball. And my mom always used to do it on the counter. I don't know, that's not working on there. Let's see if it works on here. Not so well. Anyway, just do it in your hands. This is going to take a while. I'll probably just come back when I'm ready to dip them into the margarine. Because this takes a while, and it's quite a workout, actually. It really gets the muscles going. It's how I stay fit. I roll pumpkin cloverleaf rolls every year. Oh yeah. Buff mama. Okay, so I'll come back when I have all these rolled, and we'll get them on to the next step. So I now have 36 balls of dough. I had forgotten earlier when I cut it in half, following the directions for that I had actually doubled the dough, so I needed to cut it in half first. So this is the other part of the dough that was the doubled dough, the doubled recipe. And then that half, each half I should cut in half and then cut in 6, and then cut each piece in 3. So you end up with 36 per batch, 36 balls of dough. So now you just pick 3. They're about the same size, and you roll them in the dough or roll them in the butter and stick them in each muffin tin. The butter was one thing that I didn't double. It calls for a half a cup or 1 stick. I just actually did a 1/4 cup to start out with because there's always extra butter when I'm done. And they do say you can drizzle or brush each roll with some of the leftover melted butter, and then sprinkle some sage on top as well. But that doesn't have to be done. I don't always do that. So then you just stick 3 in each cup, and we're going to let it raise for about an hour to an hour and a half until it's doubled in size. Alright, and that 1/4 cup of butter was just perfect for making this one batch, and I'll go back later and do the second batch on my own. So now we're just going to let this rise and put it in the oven when it's doubled in size. Alright, it's been well over an hour, so let's pull these out. Woo! See, they've raised nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and get the oven heated up, and then we'll pop them in. Okay, so the oven's heated. You want to bake it at 350 for, let's see, 15 to 17 minutes until they're golden brown. So we're going to go ahead and stick both of these in. I just love how big that one got. Look how big it is. It was closest to the warming center. That right there is a warming center, and I had it on, so it was providing a nice heat for those closest to it. Alright, so 15 to 17 minutes. And here is the goodness all done. Beautiful color. I love how the dough is just a golden color from the pumpkins. So delicious. Can't wait to bite into these tomorrow. So those are my pumpkin cloverleaf rolls.